Hello and welcome back to the Andrew Haines Show. In today's episode, Andrew sat down with David Livingston, the current VP of Partnerships at Spectra, a hospitality company on the cutting edge of hosting and entertainment. In the show, David was kind enough to take us through his perspective on what the true goal of a salesperson is, his stories selling for some of the world's most well-known organizations in sports, and his unique path which took him into the Alliance of American Football and Major League Lacrosse. We hope you enjoy.
Thanks for joining me, David. Glad you were able to make it.
Oh, thanks for the invitation, Andrew. Happy to join you.
Well, I think you've got such a great and unique, sports and business background. So if you can kind of just walk us through your professional career.
Happy to. I've been very fortunate, and as I sort of go through my timeline and my history, I think you'll raise an eyebrow a couple times at just the good fortune I had. And, timing, I think, applies to a lot of the life arcs that people have. But in my case, it's all been pretty fortunate. I guess as we talk about the sports business, I always like to let people know that, I have a business background, at least by education. I got my MBA from Cornell in the late 90s, and actually my first job out of business school, after interning with the company over the summer between the 2 years of the program, was to join Procter & Gamble in brand management. So for an MBA at that time, that was a pretty, someone who was interested in marketing, someone who had a sales background before going to business school, that was a pretty ideal place, at least to start start your career. And I joined Procter in what we call the juice business. Really, it was part of the company's food and beverage sector. It's not that way anymore. The company divested a lot of these brands, but at one time, Procter & Gamble, who most people associate with Tide and Pampers, the Charmin line of paper products, just household goods, but not things that you eat or drink. Procter & Gamble actually owned Folgers, Pringles, the Duncan Hines brand, and then a couple of the businesses that I worked on, Hawaiian Punch and Sunny Delight. So I started my career at P&G marketing Sunny Delight, not to the kids who actually drink the product, but the moms, generally speaking.
Ones who are buying.
Who go to the grocery store and stock the fridge, every week or a couple times every week. Interestingly enough, a great boss and still mentor while I was at P&G, a gentleman by the name of Paul Hillen. And Paul grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, walking distance from Lambeau Field, diehard Packer fan, really, really, smart and very focused from a business standpoint during the week, but during football season, you could tell once Friday afternoon rolled around, he was thinking about the Packer game. And a lot of times he would go, back to, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio. For him, it was nothing to jump in the car and go back up to Green Bay to watch a game. All that said, Paul was very interested in identifying a way that Sunny Delight could get more involved in sports. And I became part of a small group on the business that looked into and ultimately created a partnership with the National Football League for Sunny Delight. So Sunny Delight in 1997 became the official juice drink of the NFL. Didn't compete with the sodas or the beers or the isotonics, but just had its own little niche as a juice drink. And going through that process really opened my eyes to how broad and vast the business side of sports was. It was no inconsiderable amount that the brand invested in that partnership, and then you had to activate it. So, we were, aligned with all the NFL's big tentpole events, including Super Bowls and Pro Bowls and all the things they would do to activate in the grocery channel during the lead up to the start of the season, big displays in the Walmarts and large grocery chains around the country. And you could see, just how much effort needed to go in on the brand side to make that relationship work. It was one thing to make the commitment to align yourself with the league, and then you're now taking in all 32 teams and looking at ways you can activate in each of those individual markets around grocers and retailers, and finally, making sure that people had a positive association between the brand and its association with the players. Got to work with some personalities in the league as a result of some of the commercial work and advertising work that we did. Built some relationships certainly with the league executives. Got to know some of the sponsorship people at different teams, and just became interested myself in, well, hey, is there an opportunity for me in this space? Some of that came from the fact that I went to college to play football. I was not as successful in that in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I got pretty banged up, but had an interest in sports. And doing that, as we know as professionals in this business, when you sign a deal with when you read that a company has signed a deal, and certainly when you start to do some research, okay, what was that brand, what was that company, who are the executives at that company, I started getting outreach and solicitations from other organizations, events, teams, properties, leagues that wanted to be involved with Sunny Delight. And one of those came from an agency based in Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown, although not that I was aware of the company at the time, an agency called IMG. And IMG at that time, again, now we're talking the end of the 90s, 1999, was the world's largest sports marketing and management agency, all operated out of, headquartered in Cleveland, although there are offices around the world.
I didn't realize they were headquartered there.
Yeah, founded in Cleveland, Ohio, by a guy by the name of Mark McCormick, whose famous first client was a golfer named Arnold Palmer. And that had been the lineage of the company all the way through to, signing a young kid out of California named Tiger Woods, who had won the Masters in 1997, and probably by 1999 was certainly, if not the most famous athlete / entertainer / personality in the world, was on the very short list of people who were on a one name basis globally. IMG had Tiger. IMG had an opening for a sales executive in their golf division, and after talking with them, being on the other side, sort of on the buy side of the equation, they asked me if I would have interest in talking about that opportunity. And I said, sure. At the time, again, it's all timing is everything. And also just having sort of a position of leverage, as we know, working in this business can be helpful. I was at Procter & Gamble. I was doing well. Things were fine. I was, I had my first son and was getting close to, seeing my second son come along. Things were good. Why not have a conversation? That turned into an opportunity to join the firm. And, I made the decision towards the end of 1999. Sure, why not? I knew that if it didn't work out, or if I wasn't successful, I could probably A, go back to P&G, or B, go back to one of the dozens of other companies that were interested in hiring people that had P&G on their resume. And it was a different era. There was no cell phones were very, smartphones didn't exist, and cell phones were used, hey, this is for an emergency. So you would get calls at your desk, all day through the day from recruiters wanting to know, hey, just want to talk. Would you like to join this smaller packaged goods company, or this company in a different industry that needs someone with marketing experience? So I felt like the job market was going to be okay. I went from, running global projects as well as doing the fun stuff like working with the NFL at P&G to, my introduction, my first day at IMG was, hey, we're glad you're here. Good to see you. Here's your cube. And your cube, in there is a desktop computer and a landline, office telephone. And instead of the daily or monthly training that was part of my experience at Procter & Gamble. It was a handshake and good luck. And that was in November 1999. I'll never forget it. And, I was at that firm for 15 years. So all in the golf division. But as the company, went through events like 9/11 and the recession in 2008, 2009, I was still able to build relationships, deliver revenue for our clients, and got to work on a lot of different things. I won't gloss over my time at IMG too quickly, but just to give a short summary, I was able to work with some of the greatest golfers in history, attend all the major golf events around the world, sell sponsorships for tournaments, including a PGA Tour title sponsorship, hospitality, and be part of the IMG team that brought Berkman's Place to Augusta National Golf Club and helped open it in the mid 2000s, and do dozens of endorsements for golfers, male and female, on a global basis at a time when golf was definitely on a pedestal because of Tiger, and that was the great thing about it. The leverage, again, I mentioned leverage back at Procter. The leverage was I could get, and timing, but I could get an audience, at the C-suite level, just based on, the ability to tell some tales and, talk about the experience of working in the sport when Tiger was still such a big personality. And it really led to a better understanding of, what motivated a lot of companies to get involved in the space. And then B, I was also able to lean on the experience I had of being on the other side and going through what was important to Sunny Delight, in putting together that NFL partnership, before I joined IMG. So great experience, great people. The industry went through a lot of changes, and by industry, I mean the golf industry. As Tiger went through his difficulties, the sport became a little less prominent. The revenues changed a little bit, and the setup. At one time, when I joined IMG, it had 100 professional golfers as clients.
Wow.
The dominant agency, the agency that every young emerging golfer wanted to be with, and every veteran golfer that didn't necessarily have his or her own established identity wanted to be associated with, to now where it's a little more fragmented, and you see a lot of guys that, one golfer, one agent. So instead of having one company with 30 agents representing 100 golfers, you've got about 50 companies with 50 agents representing 50 golfers. It's just different, but golf became a big part of my life. Still avid, and passionate about playing the sport. Don't watch it as much as I used to, but I try and keep tabs on what the sponsorship environment looks like. And more importantly, coming out of spending so much time there, as from a golf standpoint, I know Jay Monahan, the commissioner of the PGA Tour. He was a colleague of mine at IMG. I know some of the top agents in the sport because, we were colleagues. It's just interesting to see sort of their career development and admire them from afar as they've, ascended to different heights in the sport, and, experience that I'll always value. So I've gone on for a while, but I think the importance of all that is to start with, I have a business background, and a lot of sales, in my opinion, in this space is about being able to rely on what your base of knowledge is, and then, use that in terms of the conversation you have with a client to make sure that, everything is lining up the way you want it, so that when you make the proposal, it's not a surprise, a shock. You're not saying, hey, here's what I think you should pay for this, without justifying what's in it for them. And that's what makes what I do, and the perception I have of what I do, more about building partnerships than, just selling ads. So that's been my philosophy as I've gone through.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't realize the history there with IMG. definitely put you on a great path, especially, from being on both sides of it, as far as with Procter and Gamble, and then, the agency side. Which side do you like better? Like, what, is there a preference that you have?
Yeah, I'm a seller, so I think everybody has a different style, and I try and take maybe more of a consultative approach to my selling. But it's look, when you're selling for an organization, you are directly on the revenue generation side of the business. There's a little pressure involved with it, and expectation. You also can get the attention of the top executives in the organization, because they're looking to you to sort of help meet budget, meet forecast, help the organization meet its business goals. I'm not so sure, and I don't, it never appealed as much to me to think about being on, call it the, head of sports marketing side for a company whose primary business isn't sports, for a bank or for an insurance company, or for, something where you're not directly responsible for, helping the organization keep the lights on and meet payroll. Because unfortunately, when times get difficult, those are the positions that can be determined to be a little more expendable. So I've just stayed in my lane, and look to sell with the different properties I was a part of.
It's always a nice little rush when you can put together a true partnership where really both parties can celebrate. Like I love that, is when, the brand and the property can both celebrate with the partnership. And that's what I always tell our guys. Like, we need to make it where it is a true partnership. You see too many that it's all about them or all about, the other. So how did you go from, or where did you go from IMG? You were in Cleveland at the time still, or did you relocate with IMG?
I was in Cleveland, so I was in the Cleveland office at IMG the entirety of my time there. Probably after the 08-09 recession, the company did have to go through a pretty significant contraction in terms of the number of employees and buy. And then after Tiger went through his difficulties, the golf division, was cut down a little further. By when I started, at IMG in 99, we had 8 floors of a 15-story building in downtown Cleveland, all full. It was global headquarters. Every office was full. In some cases, offices, people had to double up or triple up just to fit everybody. And unfortunately, by the end for me, which was the beginning of 2014, we were down to 6 full-time executives in our golf division from a high of over 45. And it was just a different working environment, a lot of travel, a lot of just trying to be everywhere at once. And for me, maybe just I'd seen the cycle enough to know that it was a good time to leave. I did need to stay in Cleveland. I will say another comment about this industry is, hey, you can't have everything. You can't have the exact job you want, stay in the market where you're established, and sort of maintain the same the same level of everything. In sports, you got to go where the opportunities are and be willing to do so, or else you just have to make the decision whether or not it's an industry that you're a good fit for. However, fortunately for me, there was an NBA team in Cleveland that in the late spring of 2014 had just finished its 4th straight season, missing the playoffs, and was looking to sort of bring some new energy into their sales team. I joined the Cavs officially. I think my first day was mid-June of 2014. And those of you who are NBA historians can probably figure out the math here. And I've foreshadowed it talking about timing earlier. In early July, so about 3.5 weeks later, was sitting at lunch when all of a sudden my phone started blowing up and people were driving around honking their horns. I looked down, at Twitter and see that LeBron James has decided to come back to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So
Wow.
I went into my first full season working in the NBA with the best player in the world on the team, and now the focus of the entire organization on and the league on Cleveland. Great, environment to work in from in terms of energy. I think the NBA certainly was going through some growing pains in terms of how they were going to move from a model of having local sponsors versus national sponsors. Was able to bring in a global sponsor, a Chinese telecommunications company called ZTE that, although Cleveland wouldn't have been their number one market, they wanted to be associated with the top player in the world. And they really leveraged the brand and association with LeBron in terms of their marketing in China. And most importantly, Andrew, I got to see the whole NBA cycle for 2 straight years, with the Cavs losing to the Warriors in 14-15, and then winning the championship in 16. I will say there's an asterisk next to my name for that because I was not, part of the organization when the final horn sounded in 16 when they won, but that's okay. I'm still part of the organization for everything that went into,
So no ring?
getting them to that point. No ring. I actually felt that for me, while I had learned a lot, seen a lot, and had a lot of fun, I wanted to get back to the agency space. I think I'm a little more suited for that. And so I joined a firm called Spectra in April of 2016. Was a part, at least from as a fan and as an attendee at every playoff series, including the finals for the Cavs. But, sort of got back to my roots and joining a Philadelphia company, which at the time was called Comcast Spectacor in 2016. And was back on the road again, traveling, going to different markets, sort of introducing the company, representing the properties we had, and, just leaning on my experience to help move the needle for that business.
Were you still in Cleveland at that time, or did you have to move to Philly?
I stayed in Cleveland for personal reasons, and it was a good choice for me. It actually was the first phase for me of helping adjust to this pandemic life. So I worked from home from 2016 through the summer of 2018. Would go to Philadelphia about once every 6-7 weeks and spend a week there. My parents live outside of Philadelphia, so I would visit them, check in with the home office. But I was hired, as a national sales executive, and was really expected to be on the road, as much as I would be working from the office, and, was able to make things happen for the company in markets like, Houston, Texas, and San Antonio, and Kansas City, Phoenix, Arizona, and, different markets up and down the East Coast with cold calls, going, presenting the companies, representing the properties that we had under contract, and, closing business for those properties. So it was nice and put me back in my comfort zone.
When you were with the Cavs and you did the large partnership with the company based in China, like, how did that kind of come about? Was that just a relationship that you had from the golf or prior, or is that just kind of you doing research and going to find it, or did they reach out to you?
No, doing research, cold call. They were involved with the Golden State Warriors,
Okay.
and so I certainly made them aware that there was a similar opportunity with the Cavs. They were very, very hesitant to want to align themselves not with the Cavs as an organization, but the market, because Cleveland and San Francisco do not match.
It's a little different.
And one of the things, I think it's changed a little now, but during my time in the NBA space, there was still the 75-mile DMA restriction. So any company could be a partner with any NBA team, but they could only advertise, promote, and really leverage it within that 75-mile radius. 75 miles radius of Cleveland, gets us back to one of the markets you lived in, Canton.
Yeah, good old Canton. Youngstown, probably, maybe Toledo.
Youngstown, and not even Toledo, because Toledo was
Detroit.
within the Detroit DMA. And a lot of ours was actually Lake Erie. So, and you had Toronto to the north, Detroit to the west, Indianapolis to the southwest. We couldn't even really go into Pittsburgh because that was sort of grandfathered over to the Sixers. There were a lot of interesting limits there, but what that didn't do was restrict a company from promoting it in their home country. So as a Chinese company, ZTE could proclaim themselves, the official telecommunications partner of the Cavs across that that enormous country and the enormous basketball viewing population at that time. In fact, they were very aggressive in aligning themselves commercially and getting themselves sort of featured prominently with every single Cavs home game that was broadcast back in China, and then every national game that would be repurposed for broadcast in China. So it was an interesting.
And I think it's probably like right around that time. I mean, you started to see a lot more foreign companies signing partnership deals. I mean, there was always a few, but it seems like a lot more have started popping up probably since then, specifically. But it's good to see, and I was always curious to see, how you found those unique ones that maybe everybody looks for the obvious, right? I mean, that's the easy ones. So it's good to think outside.
I'm a voracious, cold emailer, I guess I like to call it. I think I know personally, I probably don't answer the majority of the incoming phone calls I get if I don't know who they're from. And I don't expect now. I don't expect people would if they're doing that in a business context either. But most people will, at a minimum, read an email. And you gotta there's always that numbers game element to it where you gotta hope that a certain number respond. But it's an easy way to at least present yourself to people, introduce the idea, and hopefully turn that into a conversation or meeting.
So when you were with Spectra, you were national sales, and then where did you go after Spectra?
So after 2 years at Spectra, which were very good, and you'll understand why as we get to sort of the end of my history here, I was contacted and recruited by an agency, Prodigy Sports, that was doing hiring for a new professional football league being formed, the Alliance of American Football. They were going to be
Mark's going to be on the show here soon too. I don't know if you know Mark Grass, but
yeah, of course.
He'll be on.
No Mark really well. Say hello. I was just on a panel with him here in Atlanta right before the pandemic in February. The Alliance was looking to hire 8 team presidents and then fill some other executive positions for the 8 markets they were planning to launch the new league in 2019. I had done work in San Antonio as well as here where I sit right now in Atlanta, and went through the initial screening, had a couple of Zoom or online interviews with the head of business for the new league, and was then brought down for a face-to-face interview, and told that I would be assigned. I was basically told I was hired, but they needed to figure out where they were going to send the different hires they made. And
so you didn't know which market?
I didn't know which market. They asked me what I would prefer. I told them the I think 3 markets where I had experience and felt like I could make a difference, hit the ground running, Atlanta being one of them. And ultimately the league decided that I would become the first team president for the Atlanta team in the Alliance. Great experience, total startup, a countdown from, consider it, Labor Day 2018 to our first game, which was the week after the Super Bowl in 2019. Less than 6 months.
Not a big window, that's for sure.
To get
pull all that off.
Get a new league formed, to introduce a new team in that league, to get some recognition in the market, and then to get ready to bring fans and host fans at our venue by the end of February 2019. In Atlanta, football there's a very passionate base of football fans here. College is probably more predominant than professional. This is kind of the landing spot for a lot of graduates of SEC colleges, and then the other colleges in the Southeast that even though they may root for their team on Saturday, they're still passionate about what the Georgia Bulldogs do or the Louisiana State Tigers do. A lot of those people end up in Atlanta, and they've got hey, this is an LSU bar, and this is a Georgia bar, and this is a Tennessee bar, and then I guess you have to understand from a timing perspective. Again, there's that word. What was going on in Atlanta in that build up to our first season? The SEC championship is always played at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in past years of Georgia Dome, but now Mercedes-Benz Stadium here in Atlanta. The college football national championship was in Atlanta, and then the Super Bowl for 2019 was in Atlanta. As we were trying to establish the team, the Atlanta Legends, we really had to sprint to get a share of mind for sports fans who were thinking about other things in that build up to the spring. We were moderately successful, I'll put it that way. I think we did a great job of aligning ourselves with the right media partners in the market. Had a great team, including a great VP ticket sales, a colleague of mine from the Cavs named Mitch Reed, who came down to Atlanta and did a great job in putting his sales staff together and organizing them to get out and hit all the different groups and organizations and outlets that we needed to move tickets. I think the challenge was the Alliance of American Football, unlike the NFL, was operated as a single entity league, which means that all of the budgets, all of the big decisions where here's the money, were controlled by the founder, Charlie Ebersol, and a small group of his executive team. The fact that there was no money as it came to pass, was certainly an issue. But even before all that came to light, there was always an extra step required in being able to do something quickly that you knew would have an impact in Atlanta, even if it had zero relevance to something that was going to happen in Salt Lake City or Utah or Orlando. That said, we still got almost 13,000 people come out to Georgia State Stadium for our first game, and maintained a pretty solid fan base for a startup football league, with reasonable pricing through that.
I thought it was pretty solid. I mean, from a fan perspective, I thought there was a lot of stuff that was done well. I thought like the branding and even some of the tech stuff that was involved. I think more time would have definitely helped. And obviously the number one thing I've personally, had this issue is just not being funded, where you need to be. I mean, that's probably number one. I mean, without money, you could do a lot, but I mean, you
Well,
need it to really grow.
The three things I'll say about the AAF. One, football was excellent. And to support that, the level of play was definitely something that caught the eye of NFL coaches and scouts. Every single home game, every single game we had, as I went to every one of our team's games, there would be scouts lined up, wearing their NFL gear, ringing the field and in the stands, watching our guys play. There was also a significant amount of experience at the football level that was part of the organization. So from the team GM all the way through the coaching staffs, you had NFL caliber people making those football decisions. Technology, great point you raised, Andrew. There are some things, some modifications to the rules, as well as just some enhancements that will impact the NFL maybe as soon as their next upcoming season. Things like the Sky Judge, and maybe making some changes to the way onside kicks, or that ability to going for the 2-point conversion instead of kicking the extra point, that make the product a little more amenable for television. And then 3, just the effort, energy, experience, and commitment of all the people across all 8 teams that were part of those organizations. This was never a failure of one of the local markets just collapsing and sort of the whole thing imploding on itself.
Yeah.
This came down to commitments, financial commitments, and maybe strategic commitments that just weren't aligned with achieving the goals that the league wanted to in year one. A lot of focus and attention was paid on making this a national, league as quickly as possible. And the truth is, there was no team in New York. There was no team in Los Angeles. There was no team in Chicago. It was going to be really hard to sort of move the needle with those big television audiences. Yet the league was paying for those eyeballs and wasn't investing in Atlanta and Salt Lake City and San Antonio and Phoenix, and Orlando in a way that would get those populations excited. Spring professional football can work. It's just got to, the expectations have to be set appropriately, and maybe we've seen a little more success out of the XFL, until their season was cut short. I've heard word that there's plans to bring it back, and I think there's a place for it. It just still hasn't quite been done right, and we'll.
I think
sure
we
there'll
were
be more attempts.
Close. I think with the AAF, right?
Yes.
Yeah, AAF. I think it progressed the most, and it was exciting to watch that, and you could see the potential there. Like it. I think, and then the XFL, kind of the same thing. And so hopefully, I mean, just as a huge football fan, I'd love to see a league stick. Do you think that is something that the NFL eventually will just take on their own, or do you think it's not worth it for them?
I think as a business decision, it's not something they have to worry about right now, because they've got all the college football players they need, sort of going through, a 4-year long training camp and development camp for them. But there's still the question of finding a right way for the approximately 1,200 players that are out of jobs when NFL teams set their rosters going into each season, for them to have a place to continue to train and develop and grow and get that opportunity for their next chance on an NFL team. I don't know if the NFL wants to take on the incredible expense of operating a second pro league, but they certainly have interest in making sure that there's a pool of highly developed players out there that they don't necessarily have to sign to speculative, contracts as draft choices to see whether or not they pan out. And so somebody's going to figure it out. It might be, again, maybe Atlanta and Phoenix were too big, to make the AAF really stick, but there's plenty of cities out there that would embrace the opportunity of having their own pro football team in their market, and still give the players that chance to put practice and game performances on tape, so that the NFL could evaluate them and bring them in when they need to because of injury or because they have a need in their organization.
And I did see a lot of guys get signed from the league. So I mean, they were brought into camp, and I didn't follow the players enough to really see how they did, but I did notice that there's players that can move up to that level, and
absolutely
it could have just grown from there. So hopefully one of these groups gets it together and can make it work, because I want to see football in the spring. When you went to that role, was it more of a leadership role, or were you, being that you have such a huge sales background, were you still kind of that, like, some organizations that leader is still that top revenue producer or that sales leader as well? Were you in that, or what was kind of your role there?
I was the team that I put together a whole business staff. It was essentially, the best way to put it, the chief executive officer of all business operations for the Atlanta team. So I made the hires from my head of ticket sales to my head of marketing to my head of sponsorship sales and activation, and let them build their respective teams in those disciplines. They all reported to me. We met as an executive team. It was running a small business. I would certainly participate in all of the significant pitches that we had. I drove, the media discussions and relationships for the team, and I was the primary spokesperson from a business standpoint for the team. So when it came, to me visiting the local television station or appearing on the radio station or trying to drum up ticket sales, I was meant to get people excited about coming out and watching an Atlanta Legends game. And it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a step for me that I was ready to take in terms of sort of leading the overall business. By the time I left IMG, by title, I was the senior vice president of sales and business development for North America for our golf division, and had, approximately 25 people reporting to me. But this was this was looking at the business across, all of its different segments, and sort of having that pipeline back to my boss, the head of business for the AAF, and through him to Charlie and some of the other members of the executive board. So interesting process. I learned a lot. It was something I was ready for. What it also did was prepare me for the next job. So those of you who don't know the history of the Alliance of American Football, it was short-lived. We were planning on an 8-game regular season with playoffs to follow. We only made it. We only made it through 3 home games, 6 games total, and the league folded in early April of 2019. Basically, after going through a cash infusion, a new investor, and then that investor deciding he was no longer willing to continue to invest in the league. There were certainly some commitments made, some financial, as well as personal commitments made that were not kept. And when the league folded, I was the one who had to get off the phone with, my boss, and then turn to a room full, of almost 30 people and tell them, I'm sorry, the league is no longer operating. Today is everyone's last day. Take a moment, collect your personal belongings, and I'll be in touch with what the next steps are. And it was very sad. A lot of people had uprooted their lives. Myself, but I left a place where I'd been living for Yeah, over 20 years, and
Wow.
moved to Atlanta where I had done business. I had some relationships, but I didn't have any, really personal connection to the city, though I love it now. And other people had done the same because they really believed in the opportunity and, quite frankly, the potential for success of the new league. Um, I'm happy to say my job that at that instant became making sure that all of those people, as many as I could, were able to find new jobs, whether they were in Atlanta or elsewhere. And I feel pretty proud of, the role I played, small as it was, and helping them get introduced to new people and discuss new opportunities and, sort of get back on their feet that, getting hurt too badly by the change. As for me, fortunately, again, timing is everything. The the owner of the Atlanta team in Major League Lacrosse, the Atlanta Blaze, reached out to me the next day and asked me if I'd be interested in talking about an opportunity to work with his organization. And after we met and he visited, Atlanta, he wasn't from Atlanta, but came down and we met in person. I became the executive vice president of the Atlanta Blaze. So again, leading their business operations going into their 2019 season, which started Memorial Day weekend. So I didn't have too much time.
A couple
off.
weeks.
Yeah, really less.
Yeah.
And I was back, employed full time, getting to know the staff on the team and getting ready for a new season in a new stadium and trying to, again, sell tickets, promote the team, get a media presence, and, learn sort of the operations of a new league that, while was going into its 19th season, still operated like a startup. And
Was that the first season of that team there, or because they moved, I think, right from Minnesota or something?
No, you're thinking.
Oh, that's the indoor. That's the indoor. Okay.
You're thinking of the indoor team, and again, lacrosse in Georgia, lacrosse in much of the country is an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
But Major League Lacrosse, this was the fourth season of the team. They had played the previous 3 seasons in a different part of the metro area, one that was definitely a little more lacrosse friendly. They had a new owner. That new owner wanted to be in the city of Atlanta and was, had made a commitment to a new stadium location for the team that was, quite frankly, a high school stadium. A lot of challenges there. Atlanta, notorious for traffic and parking. No parking at the venue, no modern scoreboard, concrete bleacher seating, barely
only so much you could do. Yeah.
No concessions, everything. But, we were still running a professional sport with professional athletes and needed to make, at least an appropriate presentation for them and for the fans that paid to come out to the games. We did. I'm proud to say that we made it through the season. I helped usher a change in stadium to a more professional venue, which the players certainly appreciated. It also could sell beer to fans, which the fans appreciated. And ultimately, the team had its best season and made it, to the Final Four of the league and lost in overtime in the semis. So one goal away from making the finals. But the league itself, has gone through some changes, and now they've gone to that same single entity model. And going into the 2020 season, the Atlanta Blaze, moved to Philadelphia. So they are, whenever they're able to restart, whether it's this season or next, they'll be playing out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But again, great experience, worked with great people, some people very, very passionate about lacrosse, who appreciated, I hope, bringing a little more business perspective to the way, you operate a team. And at the same time, I learned a lot about, tapping into that passion with the fan base for lacrosse. And I think it's a sport. It's fun to watch. It looks good on TV, high level of athleticism. I think it's a sport that can continue to grow here in the U.S.
Yeah, I remember when I was visiting Denver a couple of years back, they have a team out there, and it was pretty cool. It was like, just happened to be over 4th of July, so it was like 30,000 people for this game at the Broncos Stadium.
They were part of the Major League Lacrosse, and
it was pretty cool.
Biggest attendance every year,
Yeah, that 4th. So, wow. So you've been on the brand side, you've been on the agency side, you've been on the major league and minor. I don't know. I take that's kind of like minor league, high level minor league or.
I would just say I think it's fair to say, the AAF was a developmental league and Major League Lacrosse is a niche professional sport. I mean, there are people who grew up playing lacrosse who think it's the best representation they're going to see of the sport, and there's others who don't. Now, with Major League Lacrosse, was interesting because that last summer was 2019 was also the debut of the Premier Lacrosse League. Different format, great players. Yep. Completely, a competitive threat to Major League Lacrosse. So we'll see how that continues to evolve.
And I think they have like a traveling schedule, don't they? Is that
they're more like the Harlem Globetrotters.
We'll go to Atlanta. We'll play 4 games this weekend, and then we'll go to Dallas next week or something.
Correct.
So after you're done with the Blaze, now you're kind of coming almost full circle back to where you were.
I like to say I'm on what I call Spectra 2.0. I really, I learned to really appreciate Atlanta in the short time I'd been here. I'd gone through the season with the Blaze, but really immediately after the AAF folded, before I left Spectra the first time, I had a candid conversation, with 2 guys I still work with today, Brian Fury of Spectra and Brian Esposito, and told them both, I am not leaving because I'm in any way, shape, or form unhappy. It's just how often are you going to get a chance to go, become the president of a team in a new sports league? I think if I don't do it, I'll regret not doing it. And I said the same thing when I left P&G to go to ING. If I don't do it, I'll really regret that I didn't at least see what I was made of. And I felt like there was always going to be opportunity for me to find another role. I hoped, if it didn't work out, back at Spectra, but someplace. Brian both, wished me well. And, when the AAF folded, they were the first to reach out and say, hey, we hope you're interested in working with us again. And I said, of course. And with Brian Fury, he and I were able to work out an opportunity to return to Spectra in a new role for me, which is I now head business development for Spectra Partnerships in North America. Then I also manage my sales staff and the properties that Spectra has relationships with here in Georgia, with a goal of expanding those across the Southeast. And then you and I get to work together, as we try and find a new naming rights partner for the Fredericksburg Nationals.
How big is the staff that you work with now?
So right now, nowhere near the size of my Atlanta Legends group, but I've got 3 direct reports.
And they all focus on the sales side or the developmental side as far as bringing on new clients?
They are looking to grow revenue through advertising and sponsorship partnerships at our venues in Georgia, and then also, in the case of some places where we don't, have a management role, to sell sponsorships on behalf of those what we would call third-party clients. We're in the youth sports complex space. We're working with teams at the minor league level in baseball, as well as hockey, with a look to expand that to some other sports. And we're also looking at cultural events and other properties where we can bring, corporate dollars in to help support those organizations, especially now, Andrew, at a time when, so much of the world has sort of stopped or sat on their hands. These organizations are going to need sort of expertise from the outside to come in and look to, generate revenue very quickly so they can get back up and running, at full speed in the near future.
I think, it's a testament to you. Number one is, the fact that, they're bringing you back because you're good, and it's hard to find, those rock stars. So I think you've had some great timing on your stuff as well, which is awesome. But just the fact that they, open arms to bring you back, I mean, it shows that, how much of an asset you were to the company. And I think relationships, and I don't know throughout your whole career how they have, come in handy, but, building and maintaining, great relationships, I think is key to long-term success.
Communication is key, and that's part of building really strong personal as well as business relationships. Probably took me longer than it should have in my life to really learn that and internalize it, but it's something critically important to me now. And on the relationship side, I think it's never about asking someone for a favor or sort of, you don't want it to be a transaction. You just want someone that, hey, I got this idea, hear me out on it. Tell me what you think. And also just making sort of out of the blue, hey, I was thinking this popped into my head. I thought about you, and I thought about, our last conversation, what you told me you were focusing on. Hope this helps. Let me know if you need some more information. People appreciate that, and feel like, you're taking an interest in them and not just in, what they can do for you.
Yeah. What benefits you personally.
Yeah.
So what's kind of, next for you? I mean, you've been all over,
I mentioned briefly that I had the working from home experience in my first go round with Spectra. So what we've all been going through over the past several weeks is no change for me. And that's okay. What I do miss, I really miss a good business trip, maybe the occasional steak dinner, and just that opportunity, more importantly, to meet face to face and get a sense of the organization that I'm looking to connect with, a property, really being able to read, someone's, body language, expressions, whether they're excited or, maybe it doesn't seem like the right fit. So you can steer the conversation, but to continue doing good work. And like I say, furthering this discipline of partnership development that we're both in, where you're matchmaking. You're not looking just to, hey, we're going to slap a sign on this and I'll never talk to you again. But let's cultivate a relationship with an organization that you hope you're doing business with over the next 10 years. I'm 25 years in, to this space now, so I also take a lot of interest, and hopefully over time more and more pride in helping, other people get a leg up, and just sharing what I've done and where I can make introductions, where I can create sort of a warm, a warm intro to a property or an opportunity to make that happen. And I feel pretty comfortable doing it. So, I haven't really felt like someone's given me the hand of rejection, and I've tried to make that overture, and it's important to me to see people continue to succeed and, really for this business to keep growing. Because I think it is very, very vital that, organizations understand they're not going to be able, on an internal basis to grow, as rapidly, as they I'm sure would like to stay competitive.
Well, I definitely, when we get out of being locked up here, I definitely want to go have a steak dinner with you and pick your brain some more. It's always good chatting. And I don't know. I maybe it's because I'm starting to get older now, but I constantly just want to learn and be around other successful people. And, I want to be the best that I can. So it's good just hearing some of your stories and experience. And I definitely, if we had 4 or 5 hours, we could get more into it, but I know that you're busy, but let's definitely get together for that steak dinner next time. And hopefully we could work together and get this naming rights sold here at the ballpark.
I'm excited. We're making the right steps in that direction. So we'll continue to do that. And yeah, I think we'll be enjoying a steak sooner rather than later. It was great talking to you today.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on, and we'll definitely have you back soon.
Hey, podcast fans. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Andrew Haines Show, and we hope you enjoyed it. We're still in the early stages of this podcast, so if you have any feedback for us, please leave us a review or reach out to Andrew on LinkedIn.